Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our guest on the program tonight, Bob Lamacki. Bob worked as a general manager for the company that manufactures the Academy Award statues before buying his own business, Awards Plus, in Barrington, Illinois. Now retired, his son runs the business. Bob lives with his wife of almost 50 years. Together, they have 4 grandchildren. His debut novel is called Fading Lights. That's what we're talking about on today's This Week in America. The novel follows one woman's memories into the past, revealing a complex portrait of life and love in World War II, a heated love story intertwined with the tragedy of war. Recommended reading for any fan of historical fiction. And Bob Lamacki joining us on This Week in America. Hi, Bob. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Rick. Glad to be here.
It is an excellent book. So much you're talking about in this book, and it's highly rated on Amazon. 92% of the reviews are 5 stars. Let's go back to the very beginning of the book. You talk about 2 words that sort of play out throughout the course of the book: why and hope. Talk about the importance of those 2 words, because as I'm reading that, I'm thinking, wow, that applies to just about all of us in our daily lives.
Sure. Well, World War II, with all its tragedies and horror, was also the most romantic period of our time. You had so many people parting ways at train stations and never to see each other again, very possibly. We were way behind militarily when the war started. We had no armaments industry. And when Eisenhower retired, his last words were, beware of the, what did he call it? I forgot what he...
the military, complex.
And I think that's one of the reasons Kennedy got killed, but that's another story.
Well, in fact, if you go to the website murderofjfk.com, you will get information on Bob's debut novel. We're talking about Fading Lights, and a second book that he has that we'll talk about during the course of the program. And the JFK assassination is part of this story that you'll be reading in the book Fading Lights. Let's go back to 1944. One of the characters in the book, Rosalie Baxter. Talk about her, because she is what you're talking about in that period. She's a young lady. She's 20 years old and ends up meeting basically the love of her life for a very brief period because he's off to fight World War II. Talk about who Rosalie is.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because there's been news in the last 10 days that there's going to be a reunion of just what's in my book, where 2 lovers were separated by World War II, and they are going to get together at Valentine's Day. My book sort of is on that same vein. One thing I do is with the book is it's very historically accurate, and it starts out with Rosalie working at the Manhattan Project. And her job was to keep a dial pointing upwards. She had 2 knobs to manipulate, and her job was to keep it within a certain range.
And she's thinking during this period, I was trying to get a real exciting job, and this is what I've ended up with. And then she realizes the significance of what she's doing. And talk about that, because for a generation, the Manhattan Project probably doesn't resonate, doesn't mean a whole lot. They see a little bit of it now in the WGN series, but they're probably wondering whether this is all fact or fiction. This really was a very crucial part of that time period, wasn't it?
It's so wonderful that we went to the moon, and such an accomplishment, and nobody's done it since. Yet nothing compares technologically to what happened with the Manhattan Project. They knew nothing. There was no infrastructure. There was no Google to go to or things like that. They didn't even know if it was going to work. Everything was theoretical. So they, one of the heads asked General Groves, well, wait a second, we have a choice of 3 phases of electricity to use. And each phase would require a city block building. And General Groves says, I have no idea what phase we're going to use. Build 3 buildings. And that's what they had to do. They had to build roads. They had to house 20,000 people. And then they had to do this with the most clandestine, covert method possible. So everything was compartmentalized, and all Rosalie knew was that to keep the arrow up. She didn't know why. They didn't know what they were working on. And this is all very true stuff. There's nothing that I have inserted in here to make it more, what's the word?
Well, and it's appreciated by the readers. When you read the reviews, they like the fact that this really is historically accurate, and you've woven in some really interesting characters, really well-developed characters. With us on This Week in America, Bob Lamacki. Bob is our guest on the program, talking about his debut novel, Fading Lights. The website is murderofjfk.com. Information on a JFK book that we'll mention towards the end of the program, as well as information, of course, on Fading Lights. A link to Amazon where the book is available. And you can go directly to Bob's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. The book highly rated, 92% 5-star rating at Amazon. And during this period, as Rosalie is working, it was a long, monotonous work, and they would look forward to going to the dances at a nearby Army base on weekends. Yeah. There she meets the gentleman that really, and it's sort of like, it starts with a glance. It's one of those moments where it changed both of their lives.
Right, right. And she is at the end of the night. The bandmaster is, they had a live band, but he switches to Bing Crosby's White Christmas, because this is the last dance before the troops are shipping out. It's December 10th, 1944. Now, that's a significant date. And so Rosalie is despondent. She's got a lot of girlfriends who are rather risque, and they're, they're telling her dirty jokes, and come on, they're already smooching with guys they don't know, and Rosalie's sitting there, and finally, when Bing starts to sing, she couldn't handle it anymore, and she starts walking away, and she gets caught in the throng. If you've ever tried to get through a dance floor, and sometimes you just can't, and everybody is, cheek to cheek, while a hand reaches out and grabs her. And within the next, and she immediately is pulled into her captain, I call him her captain, Captain Samuel West, and she puts her head on his lapel. And within, it's sort of like the Tom Hanks movie Sleepless in Seattle, when he touches her hand and says magic.
Yes.
Yeah, they're sort of the same thing. Well, within 100 words, all of a sudden they've got the L word involved, and that's not for like. They were immediately in love. She's got one line, and I'll just paraphrase it, where she says, "This is ridiculous. I don't even know you. My parents don't know you. You don't know anything about my family." I mean, she says, "You could be a Democrat, or even worse, a Republican."
And it's interesting because, and we're talking about the novel Fading Lights, a historical fiction, romance thrown in, and they spend about 36 hours together, and then it's back to the real world. It's the horrors of World War II, nobody really quite knowing what they're going to face. And it does give you a sense for the sacrifice that everybody during that era went through. We tend to forget that just because of the passage of time. This was sacrifice on everybody's part, wasn't it? I mean, everybody's life was disrupted.
Sure. That's the whole point. O'Reilly has, what's his name, Water's World, and people are asked questions like, who did we fight in the Civil War? He's on the street asking questions,
Yes.
and he gets answers like Spain. Now everybody knows it was Italy, but who's the first president of the United States? Abraham Lincoln. So we have become so ignorant about our history, and yet our history defines us. And what happened in World War II was, that war was lost. Even the English people were pretty much ready to toss it in. And then Churchill makes the great speech. We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in our homes. And what is our goal? Our goal is victory, not some sort of capitulation or some sort of peace. And it rallied the British people. And then Hitler got incensed when Britain bombed Berlin, because Himmler had promised the Führer that there would never be a bomb landing in Germany. And so he turned his wrath on London. Well, this saved London because the airfields, where there was maybe only about 100 or so Spitfires with just a little more pilots than that, were able to knock off about half of the Germans every time they came over. So every time they came over, there was a little, it was a little more disintegration, and the Spitfire was the best built aircraft. One general said, he was asked, well, what do you need? One German general, he says, I need a squadron of Spitfires. The Spitfire was built in a garage, just like the Apple computer.
Yes, yeah, in a garage. We're talking about the historical novel, debut novel, for our guest on the program, Bob Lamacki. It's called Fading Lights. It's interesting because as you're reading it, history comes to life, and it's not like a history lesson like you pick up a textbook. This is a history lesson that's woven into a really engaging story. It's difficult once you read the story to actually put it down. You're interested to see what happens with the characters, how they're torn apart after, as I mentioned, a whirlwind 36 hours as life interferes, in this case, World War II. The Fading Lights covers almost 6 decades, and you do really an excellent job of going back and forth between the decades. Talk about the challenges of doing that, because each decade sort of has its own different, distinct mindset.
Yeah, as a writer, that's one of the more difficult things. Is to have that continuity, especially when you are not a full-time writer. It's a full-time writer is one thing. He gets up, writes, goes to sleep, writes. But
Right.
in the meantime, I've got a little business to run and grandchildren to deal with happily, and so keeping that continuity was difficult, but it's funny. I never once had writer's block. I put my fingers over the keyboard, and away they went. And pretty soon, it started to take on its own nature. I had a whiteboard that I started on November 16th of, it would have been, I think, 2012. And I wrote 500 words. So I put it on the whiteboard. And then we went to the 16th, 17th. We went, didn't miss a day. And every day I put my number count on there. And it's funny, it changed the focus from the keyboard to the whiteboard. I used to get up and look at the whiteboard. That was my goal, to finish the whiteboard. Not so much the book. It's fun. It's funny how visuals are so important.
They
Now
really are. They can motivate. They can keep us
yeah,
on track. Fading Lights is the book we're talking about. You can find the book's available all across the country. Bob Lamacki, Lamacki, is the author. You can get directly to Bob's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. His website is murderofjfk.com. I tease that a lot. In a couple minutes, we'll tease it even more, and then we'll have Bob back in the program to talk about that. Towards the end of the book, you've got Rosalie. It's Christmas time. She's listening to her favorite Barbra Streisand song, and she's thinking, the golden years, not so golden. I just don't feel alive anymore. And again, the book is so relatable because you get to that period, and there was really something missing in her life at that point. I don't want to give anything away here, and you'll love the ending of the book,
yeah,
but there
yeah.
really was a void in her life at that point.
Well, you reach that point where what's before you is less than what already happened.
Exactly, yes.
And that becomes, we all experience it, and we experience it so quickly. I mean, it's amazing. One day we just walk into the bathroom and we look at the mirror and say, holy cow, who the heck is that?
Yes.
Now, Fading Lights, I should tell you what that's about if it's not clear. So they spend their 36 hours, and they're working on the Manhattan Project. Captain West gets a call, and he has to leave. They thought they had more time, so she goes with him to the disembarking station, and there's a bus. It's midnight, and the bus pulls away, and she looks into the distance, and two red lights in the distance can last a long, long time, and they don't just disappear suddenly, they fade. And even, to the point where there's just a red glow left. And so that's sort of the idea. And Rosalie, at that point, she was resigned to do what she was doing, but she was a nurse, and she knew Kay Summersby in the novel. And Kay Summersby was Ike's driver and very possible or very probable lover.
Yes.
Hard to imagine Ike having a lover, quite frankly, but they say the same about me.
And Fading Lights, it comes up again towards the end of the book. We're rapidly running out of time, and it's history, it's romance. It gives us a new appreciation for this great generation and the sacrifices they went through, and where we are today. Obviously, comes from a great love of country, which you express in the book. And the book is called Fading Lights. Murder of JFK, and I didn't realize this till we're ready to start recording the program. This is another book that you have out there, and
Yes.
give me about a minute on the information, and that's, of course, available at the website, murderofjfk.com.
Right. Well, this book starts with a murder in Wisconsin, and it's a brutal murder. And we know who does the murder because we go through his thoughts. And then we go backwards, and he is, there's something about your first girlfriend. And something came over him, and he did her harm. And the rest of his life, he decided that he needed redemption, and it deals with redemption. Now there is another character. He's the police chief who has twin sons, and they are doing an investigation of the JFK assassination. So that's how I get the JFK assassination in there. So it's really two books in one, and I thought it was a very unusual way to interject it. And then Vincent Bugliosi wrote this book, Reclaiming History. The book is a doorstop. It's about 6 inches deep, and it is absolute garbage. He wrote Helter Skelter.
Yes.
He put Charles Manson away. He lists 53 points why Oswald was guilty, and I'll just go over two of them. Point 10 was that Oswald at 12:15 looked out and he asked everybody, "What's all the commotion? How come there are people outside?" So Bugliosi says it was in all the papers, so obviously Oswald was lying. Okay. Point number 9 is that day Oswald did not bring a paper to work. You see how trivial it is.
Interesting. Yes, and I'm looking forward to
maybe he didn't.
to looking into that because it brings up a whole new set of questions. It's at the website murderofjfk.com. Information there on Bob's debut novel, Fading Lights. Bob Lamacki has been our guest on the program. Bob, it's been a pleasure. The time went by way too quickly. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. And I'm working on a follow-up to the JFK book, and it's MLK. The Murder of MLK, to be followed by RFK.
Well, we will have you back frequently to talk about everything you've got going there. And again, Fading the Lights, it's a great story, but it's all based on actual history. And it's an excellent read. It's called Fading Lights. And again, the website is murderofjfk.com. Bob Lamacki has been our guest on This Week in America. You can link on directly to Bob's website by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us.